We have followed the Vancouver Canucks every step of the way, 49 games through their 82-game season, and we'll knock off more post-game pods after each and every one. And, of course, this team's going to the playoffs, and we are excited to continue the post-game podcasts once we get to the games that really matter as well. So the first time since we have been doing Rink Wide, the Vancouver Canucks will be a playoff team. We'll get to some of our predictions here in a sec, but I mentioned earlier, we always do a stat that stands out, and or if you mentioned that New Jersey game moments ago,
yeah.
Got to go way back to early December then. So I was looking at this, that last season at the All-Star break, the Vancouver Canucks had surrendered 5 or more goals in a game 21 times. 21! It's happened 4 times this season. And the last time was that 6-5 loss to the New Jersey Devils on December the 5th, I believe it was. So we're coming up to, by the time they get back in action in Carolina after the break, it'll be 2 full months since they have given up 5 goals in a hockey game. I mean, you really want to look at the differences between last year's team and this year's team. Last year's team could score goals. They couldn't prevent them, and they have done with the Rick Tocchet structure that we talked about right off the top and the goaltending. That has been sort of the biggest change for this year's group of Vancouver Canucks. So, 21 times last year before the All-Star break, gave up 5 or more this time. It's only happened on 4 occasions. All right, I gave you guys a little homework because we got this idea to come up with a special pod here during the break. And one of the things I said was, just go back and look through the schedule, come up with a game that jumps out at you, that stuck with you all of these months or weeks later, or in Quadrali's case, days later. We'll get Dave's prediction in a sec. But Arf, we'll start with you. What of the 49 that they've played, is there one that really kind of clung to since it went down?
Yeah, going to mid-November against the Islanders, that 4-3 overtime win, down 2-0, down 3-1. Bo's returned. Bo scores in Rogers Arena. I mean, there's so much emotion there, obviously, from both sides, with the way things happened with the trade and everything like that, for him to come back and, the big media scrums before the game. But Quinn Hughes, 3 points. JT Miller, 3 points. Brock, 3 points. 43 shots on net. And 43 is an interesting number because that's who scored the overtime winner. And it wasn't just any of those ordinary overtime winners, Jeff. He called this shot. He was Ola Nolan at the All-Star game pointing to that top corner. He was Babe Ruth at the plate pointing to exactly where he was. As soon as he got that puck, we've talked about it before, you knew that puck was going in the back of the net. And I think that, to me, that game kind of encapsulated what the Canucks were about. And even all these games since then is that's the identity of that team, that they're going to claw their way back even against good teams and find ways to win.
I love that selection. You're right. I mean, just the uber confidence of Quinn Hughes. There was no way he was going to miss that breakaway and the setup feed to walk in basically untouched from center. The other thing that was cool about that night was, you mentioned all the individual point totals. That night, Quinn, JT, and Elias Pettersson all left the building tied for first place in National Hockey League scoring with 26 points. Just optically to see it, to go to NHL.com and click on the stats, and 1, 2, 3 all tied there. All of them Vancouver Canucks. So, an incredible night against the Islanders.
And so poetic because Bo Horvat, he missed the defensive zone coverage on the Hughes goal, right? So there was that aspect of it too. We saw that so much in Vancouver. Bo scores a goal and then doesn't defend, and then the Canucks lose. Saw it the other way around. It was so poetic. And now that I have to bring up mine, I feel kind of bad because it's not nearly as good as the one Irf picked.
But involved overtime.
It's good. And like Irf's, it's got a good story. I'm going with the most recent game that we saw against the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Is that because you can't remember any of the other games? You just went with the recency bias here?
No, it's because Brock Besser finally hit 30 goals. That's the big thing that stands out for me is, look, we know Brock Besser the person. We know everything he's been through. I think that's one of the best stories that this team has had this year, aside from coming back from being down 4-1 to start the third period, which is an incredible enough feat in itself. But for Brock Besser to score the hat trick at Rogers Arena on his 30th goal of the season, a milestone he has been chasing for so long. I think it's the best story that this team has had this season, but damn, Bo Horvat's return to Vancouver is a very close second, if not the top story that they've had.
Oh, and it's a memorable game. I mean, the comebacks are always stirring when they end the way, they had a comeback against St. Louis that didn't quite end the way they wanted, but when they got it right, and it was Elias Pettersson with his second of the night, and against the backdrop of the turnover that led to the shorthanded goal and the first goal of the night, and the coach's comments, and then Petey got it right, and for Brock, as you said. That's been such a good news story, and it started with the 4 on opening night against the Oilers, but he's had 3 hat tricks now, and what a difference a year makes for Brock Besser. And it was funny because we were talking earlier about the success of the power play. It comes on 3-on-3, so it's not a special teams goal, but a ton of ice and best players out there. I didn't notice it on Saturday, but when I went back and watched the winning goal, like I couldn't get over Zach Werenski completely ignoring Elias Pettersson as he circles behind the net without the puck. And Werenski just puck watching, but again, it's Quinn Hughes, it's Brock Besser. Like, they're mesmerizing. You can understand why opponents are sort of locked onto these guys, but we're seeing that's becoming a bit of a sneaky Pete, if you will, because he scored the power play goal against the Leafs that way, where he circled the net, and defenders lose him, and he's the wrong guy to lose. And sure enough, there he was on the doorstep to bang home the winner. So, no, I mean, that's a fun game. The opponent, you take that into context, but so much better for the Canucks to go into the break on a high and after a win rather than an ugly loss to the Columbus Blue Jackets. So I think for lots of those reasons, and certainly a night that Brock Besser will never forget, getting to 30. For me, again, there have been splashier games, but when I look at games that maybe signaled what this team was about and what it was capable of, you go back to the 10-1 win against San Jose, and that's not my answer here. The following game was against the Dallas Stars, a Saturday night, Rogers Arena. The Stars at the time were 7-1-1, and with that win over San Jose, the Canucks moved to 7-2-1. And so it was an early season heavyweight slugfest based on the records at the very least. And the Stars, a very credible opponent, obviously. And I was curious, they had their laugher at the tank. How were they going to respond against a good Dallas team? And they traded chances in the first period, nothing doing, no goals, but you may remember Thatcher Demko had that glove save on Wyatt Johnson. It was just incredible. One of his saves of the season. And then as the night unfolded, Pia Suter scored, Elias Pettersson scored. Ian Cole had a massive hit on Matt Duchene. Like, the crowd was into it. And for me, I remember my takeaway that night was, this has been missing for so long now in this market, was sort of a marquee matchup where both teams were good. The crowd was into it, hanging on everything. It was just fun. Like, the fun sort of returned to Rogers Arena, and it's been there on most nights. But for me, the Canucks grinding out a low-scoring game against a good Dallas opponent, I thought spoke volumes, especially coming off a win where maybe they thought that, hey, they're all going to be easy now. That wasn't the case. But they beat the Stars then. They've beaten a handful of other good teams as well. So that was one that jumps out at me. I don't know if you guys, if there's anything from that night that stuck with you, but certainly I thought that, that sent some sort of message that this is a little different. This group, there's something with this group that it's able to win a game like this one.
I think that one really stands out because to that point, the Canucks hadn't really faced any top teams. And that was kind of the first litmus test of the season. And like you said, Jeff, kind of a signal to everybody that, okay, this team is different.
Well, they beat the Stars, and they've beaten a lot of good teams since then. And as we said, this final stretch run, there are going to be a ton of big games. So that's going to make this a whole lot of fun between now and the postseason. Ultimately, what they do over these final 33 games is going to determine where they finish in the Pacific Division, in the Western Conference, the overall standing. So it is prediction time, guys. How does this play out for a hockey club that is 33-11-5 through its first 49 games? Just an incredible pace. But I asked you both to come up with predictions for both the win total and the final point total for the Vancouver Canucks. So, Irf, what have you got?
53 total wins. I think that they're going to win 20 of their next 33 games. I just think that if you look at the opponents, yes, they're going to play the Dallas Stars. Yes, they're going to play the Vegas Golden Knights a few times, the Winnipeg Jets, the LA Kings. They're going to play a lot of good teams, but this team is a good team. And I think that when it gets down to it and to getting to these meaningful games, like we just talked about earlier in this show, that they need to be in those hard games. They need to be in those meaningful games. We're not going to have the quote-unquote death march anymore. Instead, it's going to be get battle-tested, get ready for the postseason. So I think this team can do it. I think that with the consistency of their goaltending, with the way that the power play has been kicking, and if they add at the deadline and get a top six player, or they move a defenseman and get another defenseman, this team can only get better. And I think that, this coaching staff and obviously, the management team definitely knows that they want to get better, and it's going to be an interesting next 5 weeks, not to mention a few months here.
All right, Dave, you mentioned it almost daily on Canucks Convo that math isn't necessarily your strong suit or your friend, but...
Yeah, so people know that. So basically what happened is I came in here, started trying to work backwards, and that was not a good method because I just wrote 109 points, and then I worked backwards and saw, okay, that's not nearly as many wins. That's more losses than I would anticipate. So like Irf, I have them at 53 wins. I have them at 113 points to finish the season, which means 11 losses and 2 overtime losses to go with the 20 wins. I think 113 points is a lot higher than I would have thought, but once I actually had to do the math, which took me about 20 minutes, as you guys know, that's what I came up with. 113 points, 20 wins, 2 overtime losses.
This is kind of wild because we did not compare notes. I also have them going 20 and 13, which means 20 wins, 40 more points, gets them to 111 on the season. Now, I have to cop to the fact that it wasn't that long ago, earlier this month, in fact, Seagram and Price had a poll question about will they be a 100-point team this season, and I just thought with the games that you mentioned, Irf, there are going to be some losses along the way. They're not going to win them all. It just some nights feels like they will. And I thought their pace would slow down, and I said they're going to get close, but they're going to fall short. But now I look, like 20 and 13 seems eminently doable for this hockey club, and that gets them to 111 points. So, I think I got that one wrong. They're going to be a 100-point team, which is remarkable, and the fact that they've got 71 already in the bag at the All-Star break. So, with all of that said, 111 points is going to put them in good stead to take a run at the overall. I mean, people here in this market have been there and done that with the President's Trophy. I don't know that finishing first overall is the most important goal. First in the West, certainly, likely to yield an easier first-round playoff opponent, and most certainly you want to finish first in the Pacific Division. So we'll see how it all plays out, guys. But as we wrap up the special roundtable here, all of this good that the Vancouver Canucks have done, the chance that they may add to this roster to make them an even better hockey club, how do we define success? What will make this a successful season for the Vancouver Canucks? Irf?
Well, I think, one, winning the division. I think you've been the big dog all season long. You can't just not win your division with the way that things have played, but you get into the postseason and you have to keep the ball rolling. I don't think that getting into the postseason and having home ice, if they do in fact, and they probably will, and you go out in the first round is deemed a success. Yes, the bubble playoffs were whatever, and then you didn't make the playoffs a couple of seasons. You can't be happy, right? And I think that that's the message from Rick Tocchet and his coaching staff, and all the way from the top down, to be completely honest, is we're not going to be happy just going into the playoffs and getting in for a round. I think you have to win a run round minimum, and especially if they added the deadline at the trade deadline, your goals are definitely way higher than that.
So we've heard this team is going to be very aggressive at the deadline. So Irf brought up goals being way higher than that. I said winning a President's Trophy is great, but go win the cup. That's the ultimate goal. That's the ultimate goal that you're playing towards. So
okay, fair enough, but that's not the question here.
It's not a failure. You're right. It's not a failure if they don't get to the cup. I am saying that if they need to, if they are looking to make their mark at the trade deadline and be aggressive, you have to go deep into the playoffs. If I'm setting it at what's a disappointment, obviously a first round exit, but I'd also say a second round exit. If you have that home ice advantage, getting knocked in the second round probably isn't what this team is hoping that their ceiling is going to be. So you hope that it doesn't end there, because if you're going, I don't want to use the term all in because we don't know what they're going to do yet, but if they're going to be very aggressive at the deadline, which by all accounts they will be, you're hoping for more than 2 rounds of playoff hockey.
Hope, sure. I just think that I'm a believer that you do have to walk before you run, and I think that they have sprinted to this record here that kind of came out of nowhere. Like, I was in the camp that thought they would be bumping up against the playoff bar, and if all went right, as Jim Rutherford said on the eve of training camp, that they could be a playoff team. Like, there was enough star power here that they could get into the playoffs. But the idea that we're sitting here at the All-Star break talking about first overall and President's Trophies and all those types of things, that said, you look around them in the West. Vegas, the defending champs, Colorado, a winner not that long ago. The Dallas Stars have had a bunch of deep runs to the Stanley Cup. The Edmonton Oilers have had playoff failure, but they've been in the postseason. I do think that experience, especially when the baseline for Pettersson and Besser and Hughes and Demko was the bubble, I do think experience matters to a degree. So sure. I think for me, they have to win a round. They absolutely have to win a round. That this team is built with star power at every position. They've got to, if they don't win a round, like if they get in, and as you said, like, we've been there. Like you think back to the end of the Sedin era where they had home ice against the Kings. Now the Kings were not your typical 8th seed, and ultimately they went on to win the Stanley Cup. But that was a 1-8, and the Canucks did nothing with home ice there. The following year was the ultimate disappointment that led to the firing of Alain Vigneault, where they got swept by the San Jose Sharks. But even the last time that they were in traditional playoffs and playoff games at Rogers Arena, they had home ice against the Calgary Flames. They were the higher seeded there, and they lost. So, again, I think that the way the season's gone, the way that the star players have leveled up, they have to win a round. Now, playoff hockey, a lot of times, is about matchups. And there's a very possible world where they run into the defending champs in round one. Like, that's not going to be easy, but playoff hockey isn't supposed to be easy. I still think for all the good that they've done, they can't flush it with a first round exit. So I think at least one round just to give this fan base something to really chew on. I think the buy-in is back. We feel it around the rink on a lot of nights now, but man, that would be a shame for all the good that they've done if they kind of went meekly in round number one.
The way I look at it, and maybe my expectations are too high, but the way I look at it is I'd expect this team right now to win a playoff round. If you're adding at the deadline, if you're aggressive at the deadline, and we're asking what is deemed a success, I don't know if I'm ready to say getting bounced in the second round is a success. Now, okay, who your second round opponent is, does it go 7 games? Is it close? Okay, sure, you might be able to call that a success, but like if you get swept in the second round, I wouldn't call that a success.
I think the book on the Canucks from good teams that they've played and they've lost to Vegas, they've lost to, Flames aren't a good team, but they've lost to the Flames, is they don't like being played against physically. And if you lean on them, that's kind of where they bend a little bit. And that's exactly what the playoffs are. So if you're looking to go get experience and go get someone who's been there before, or go get someone who you know is going to put you over the top, they've got to have that experience. They've got to have that pedigree of maybe being one of the guys that's tougher to play against, that's tough in the faceoff circle if you're going to get a center, or a winger that can score a goal. Or if you're moving a defenseman and you're trying to get a defenseman, it's someone that can eat up minutes, that can help your top 2 guys, not have to rely on Quinn Hughes playing 30, 32 minutes a night, where you're getting guys like that, because it is big, it's physical in the playoffs. And as this team is currently constructed, yes, I do believe that they can win around, but it's going to be tough.
Well, the season's been fun. This has been fun, guys. We're looking forward to the final 33 games of the regular season. It starts on February 6th in Carolina, the first of a 5-game road trip. And of course, we will be there after each and every one of those games with our Rink Wide post-game pods. Irf and Dave, you guys will be part of that down the stretch and again into the playoffs when the postseason rolls around. Enjoy what is left of the All-Star break. Again, we appreciate your support so much on the post-game pods, on this special roundtable as well, guys. Nice work.
Absolutely.
And we'll reconvene when the Canucks start playing again. That's going to do it for this edition of Rink Wide Vancouver.